Iran is not Venezuela. The Ayatollah was not a president. He was a religious leader from a region notorious for radical Islamists. And the United States and Israel turned him into a martyr.
In security and defense planning environments, escalation is usually interpreted through the logic of pressure. Sanctions are introduced with the expectation that strain accumulates inside the targeted system. Leadership removal is evaluated for its capacity to disrupt coordination and introduce instability. These assumptions shape how intelligence briefings and policy forecasts anticipate responses. The strike on Ali Khamenei exposed a forecasting tension. Leadership removal is commonly analyzed through the framework of decapitation strategy, which assumes that eliminating a central figure disrupts coordination and weakens the targeted system. The immediate shift in Iranian messaging toward martyr language suggested that another mechanism was operating. Rather than signaling collapse, the framing appeared to convert the leader's death into a source of symbolic continuity. The forecasting problem appears when leadership loss is interpreted as more than operational disruption. Research on leadership targeting shows that killing leaders does not consistently destabilize organizations, and that outcomes vary across institutional contexts. Studies of militant and political organizations indicate that groups with established structures and strong ideological cohesion often adapt to leadership loss. Conventional deterrence models assume that actors facing credible coercive pressure adjust behavior to avoid further cost. Economic sanctions and leadership targeting are therefore expected to expose vulnerabilities and constrain escalation. In some political systems, a death framed as sacrifice strengthens authority and reinforces internal solidarity. Under those conditions, external pressure may consolidate support rather than produce caution or fragmentation. This essay examines how leadership targeting is interpreted within a political system where religious authority is institutionally embedded. The analysis does not attempt to resolve every dimension of the strike or the wider regional conflict. Other strategic variables remain relevant, including military balance, nuclear posture, and external intervention. The focus here is the interpretive mechanism that shapes the early phase of crisis response.
Sandra, we just got this in literally 2 minutes ago, but Fox News can confirm that Iran's supreme leader, the Ayatollah Khamenei, is dead following Israeli strikes against his compound and location earlier today.
Ali Khamenei was at home in his residence, knowing he was being hunted down by the United States, knowing he was being targeted by death. He was surrounded by fellow shaheeds who also knew that they were going to die. But they also understood that there was a purpose in their death, because by dying, they entered into martyrdom.
Iranian state media confirmed the death of Ali Khamenei within hours of the 28th of February 2026 strikes. Broadcasts immediately described him as a martyr, using religious and revolutionary titles. The term Shaheed appeared in official messaging, and coverage shifted directly from confirmation of death to framing the event as sacrifice. Clerics on state platforms invoked Quranic references associated with martyrdom and endurance. A 40-day mourning period followed. Flags were lowered, and state institutions closed for the first week. State television showed large gatherings in Tehran, Qom, and Mashhad, with black banners and mourning recitations consistent with established religious observance. Western reporting framed the strike in operational terms. Early analysis focused on the removal of the system's apex decision-maker and the risk of escalation or command disruption. Coverage described the attack as a joint US-Israeli operation against Iran's power structure and assessed likely retaliation and regional military posture. Western reporting shifted as Iranian messaging consolidated around martyrdom and mourning practice. Coverage began explaining succession mechanics, including the role of the Assembly of Experts and the clerical process for selecting a new supreme leader. Attention turned to what the transition might mean for regime durability. Policy commentary warned the strike could increase regional instability and raise the risk of wider conflict. Regional specialists and analysts of Shia political theology introduced explanations of clerical hierarchy and the ritual vocabulary surrounding martyrdom. Analysis moved toward the procedural steps required to appoint a successor and the time frame over which authority could consolidate. An event initially interpreted as leadership decapitation was increasingly examined through the durability of Iran's constitutional and religious architecture.
President Trump has said he wants Iran to play out like Venezuela, where America took out the leader and dealt with his deputy. But Iran is very different. The killing of Khamenei and other senior figures has not toppled the regime, which has dense structures embedded over 4 decades. As well as the supreme leader, there's the Iranian president, who is still alive. And while Iran has elections where voters choose a president and a parliament and an assembly of experts, who we'll come back to, in reality, power is held by a small clerical elite. The supreme leader sits at the top of that elite. He appointed not only the head of the judiciary, but also half of the influential Guardian Council of 12 clerics and lawyers, which upholds the Islamic system. They veto laws and tightly control who can even run for elections, including elections for that assembly of experts, the 88 Shiite clerics who will choose the next supreme leader and are very much regime loyalists. Now, there's also the Revolutionary Guard, set up 40 years ago as a parallel force, really, to the military, and are arguably more powerful than the military itself, set up to expressly defend Iran's Islamic system. Under the Revolutionary Guard, there's the Basij militia. They're a vast volunteer paramilitary organization with an extremely tight grip on Iranian society, shutting down protest and enforcing Islamic rule. Now, these institutions are living on. In theory, Iran's now being run by a 3-person interim council of the president, Masoud Pezeshkian, along with the head of the judiciary and a member of the Guardian Council, with other powerful figures heavily involved behind the scenes. So, the Supreme Leader's death, hugely significant, of course, but so are the structures that he entrenched and which have outlived him.
Research on cultural memory by Jan Assmann shows how historical events retain meaning through ritual repetition and narrative transmission. Sociological work by Randall Collins shows that repeated ritual participation reinforces collective identity. The historical reference point is Karbala. In 680 CE, Hussein ibn Ali was killed after refusing allegiance to the Umayyad ruler Yazid. In Shia Islam, his death is remembered as resistance to illegitimate authority and is commemorated annually during Muharram. Through repeated ritual commemoration, the event remains embedded in collective memory. The relevance of the martyrdom tradition became visible in the immediate response of Iran's political institutions after the strike. The immediate mourning cycle did not suspend political authority for long. Within days of the strike, Iran's Assembly of Experts moved to resolve succession and confirmed Mojtaba Khamenei as the new supreme leader.
Iran has a new supreme leader. What does that mean for your military effort and the confrontation with the United States and Israel?
That means the system is quite functioning.
So the United States says it's drastically degraded the Iranian military, the capabilities as far as missiles is concerned, drones is concerned. How much longer can you do this?
That is one of the false narratives that the United States government is producing. Iranian military is quite strong, as you see, because they have the motivation, they have the arms that they need, which are produced in Iran. As a matter of fact, we are not dependent on any other country for weapons and arms.
So your side is ready for a long war if the United States and Israel choose that. Do you consider this an existential threat to the Islamic Republic?
It is an existential threat to the Islamic Republic, and therefore we have to stay with full might.
The transition carried strategic significance because it demonstrated that symbolic loss and institutional continuity were unfolding simultaneously. Leadership death embedded in an active martyr tradition extends the consequences of decapitation beyond command disruption into the wider escalation environment. Under these conditions, the event can authorize retaliation across several theaters and expand the political space in which aligned actors operate. Early statements attributed to Mojtaba Khamenei included threats directed toward Gulf states and shipping routes connected to the Strait of Hormuz. RAND commentary on the early phase of the conflict observed that Mojtaba Khamenei's selection projected stability within the Iranian political system and signaled that the government continued to function despite the loss of its senior leadership. As an analyst monitoring the crisis, attention turns to the indicators that follow leadership targeting. The first concern is how retaliation authority is communicated and whether the response remains centralized or becomes distributed across aligned organizations. A second indicator is the tempo and geographic spread of activity among Iranian-aligned actors operating outside Iran's borders. A third involves whether economically exposed sectors such as maritime transit or energy infrastructure become part of the escalation pattern. Reporting from Reuters, AP, and regional monitoring groups indicated that after February 28th, the central question concerned whether the leadership strike would remain a contained exchange or develop into a wider regional confrontation. Subsequent leadership assassinations did not alter the pattern of response. The killing of additional senior figures, including Ali Larijani and members of the intelligence apparatus, extended the decapitation strategy beyond a single event. Available reporting indicates that these actions produced tactical disruption without corresponding strategic collapse. To conclude, it is reasonable to assume that Western conflict models incorporate martyrdom and strategic culture within their analytical frameworks. The associated risks are often accepted in favor of short-term disruption. In this case, leadership death was incorporated through martyrdom and succession with continued regional activity. Disruption occurred, but the Iranian state adapted and expanded its response. The available evidence indicates that Trump underestimated how Iran's strength would operate under pressure. The integration of loss into political and strategic response has proven more consequential than anticipated. This has been a field of record analysis, a neutral examination of events as they have unfolded. It serves as a structured record of how this moment may be understood within its historical and strategic context, focused only on answering the question the essay presents. Thank you for watching. If you found this useful, you can support the work by liking, sharing, and subscribing.